Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the I'm the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and it is always a joy to see you all with us. I'm so grateful that you are here tonight for our annual Rule of Law series. I'd like to start by extending a very, very special thank you to our sponsors for this program. Our co-presenter is SMU's Dedman School of Law, and we are thrilled to partner with SMU for tonight's program and hope that this series inspires both their students and faculty. And it's wonderful to see students here with us tonight. Our founding sponsor is the Jones Day Foundation. We've been working with Jones Day team for a few years to bring this series to life, and we are so grateful to continue our partnership, and hopefully this will be an annual thing that we'll do for years to come. And our presenting sponsor is the Sumners Foundation. We are really thrilled to have a group of Sumner scholars with us tonight. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your support. And tonight's event sponsor is Match Group. So I'd appreciate it if you all would help me thank our incredible sponsors for this program. And I'd also like to thank our community partners for this program, Communities Foundation of Texas, SMU Human Rights Program, and Southwest Jewish Congress. And as always, I'm pleased to welcome our museum board members, our volunteers, and our board members, our museum members, and our volunteers. We couldn't do this sort of programming without you. It's always a joy to see you here, and I just hope you know how grateful I am for your support. If you are not part of this incredible group, please get engaged. Go to our website and figure out how to volunteer or become a member to help support programming like tonight's. Before we introduce our speakers, I would like to share a brief highlight about the work of the Sumners Foundation, followed by remarks from Board Chair Lon Williams on behalf of our presenting sponsor.
We come from different walks of life and follow different paths, pursue different professions, practice different traditions. We are different. Yet one thing unites us. We are Americans. We are the Sumners Foundation, developing a network of thought leaders around the founding ideals of self-governance by funding scholarships and investing in programs that educate and engage Americans. The Sumners Foundation, on the job since 1949.
Thank you, Mary Pat. Hi, my name's Lon Williams, and I'm chairman of the board of the Sumners Foundation. And the Sumners Foundation's mission is to encourage the study, the teaching, and research into the science and art of self-government so that the American people can better understand the fundamental principles of our democracy and be guided in shaping government policies. Now, we're probably best known in regards to meeting that mission statement for our scholarships. Our flagship scholarship is a 3-year full ride scholarship to the Dedman School of Law at SMU, as well as at Oklahoma City University School of Law. We also offer junior and senior year scholarships, 2 years, to undergraduate institutions around the state of Texas and Oklahoma. In addition to that, though, we have various programs that we are proud to sponsor, numerous programs which I'll not get into, but such things as the State Bar of Texas Law-Related Education, Texas Boys and Girls State, YMCA Youth and Government Program, Better Angels Program, as well as former members of Congress and their debate series, which is particularly popular amongst our scholars. But then we have the museum's Rule of Law series, which is why you're here tonight, which encourages involvement in the democratic process and reflects the foundation's goal to increase an understanding of civic and personal responsibility. The foundation is hopeful that through our work in sponsoring events like this one this evening, we can encourage democratic engagement and create an educated, engaged citizenry. I'm happy to share with, well, I was going to share with you the video, but we've already had the video. So I'm going to share Mary Pat with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lon. I think you took my remark. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. So before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping remarks. If you haven't silenced your cell phone, please do that so we all can enjoy this program uninterrupted. And also, we will leave time at the end of this discussion for Q&A. So please write your questions on the note card, and our volunteers will come by and pick them up, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jason Nance, Dean of SMU's Dedman School of Law, to introduce tonight's speakers.
Thanks so much, Mary Pat. It's really a pleasure to be with you here tonight. I'm excited to introduce tonight's speakers. And so we have our moderator, Chris Connolly, who's a reporter for KERA's One Crisis Away series, where he covers issues related to financial instability and poverty. He joined the station in 2015, covering politics and criminal justice in Fort Worth. Christopher is a graduate of Antioch College in Ohio and earned a master's degree in journalism from the University of California at Berkeley. Tonight's featured speaker is Brittany K. Barnett, a best-selling author, attorney, and entrepreneur. As a corporate attorney, Brittany committed herself to pro bono representation of her clients unjustly sentenced under federal drug laws. Her dedication to this life-changing work has resulted in freedom for numerous people, serving decades to life in prison for federal drug offenses, including 7 clients who received executive clemency from President Barack Obama. Her many accolades include being named one of America's outstanding young lawyers by the American Bar Association and receiving a Young Leader Award by the Dallas Women's Foundation. Her book, A Knock at Midnight, A Story of Hope, Justice, and Freedom, was released to critical acclaim in 2020. She is also, and this may be the best part, but she may disagree with this, she is also a graduate of the SMU Dedman School of Law, and we are very proud of Brittany. In fact, she just received 2 distinguished awards, one Distinguished Alumni Award from the SMU Dedman School of Law, and then another Distinguished Alumni Award from SMU. So join me if you could welcome both of these individuals here with us tonight. We're very excited to hear from both of them, and I'll now turn it over to Christopher and Brittany for our main conversation. Thanks very much.
All right, welcome everybody. So you and I have had the privilege of talking a few times over the years when I've had the chance to report on some of the initiatives that you've worked on. So I was really thrilled at the opportunity to talk with you again. And just, I think the place to start is with the Buried Alive project. I want to kind of, get to where you are now, but start there. Tell me about the Buried Alive project. This is an initiative that you founded in 2018 that helps people serving unjust prison sentences for violating federal drug laws. Why did you decide to take on clients whose prison sentences seemed irreversible?
Yeah, I was very involved as a pro bono lawyer with President Obama's historic clemency initiative. During this initiative, he granted more sentence commutations than any modern day president combined. And I was also a corporate lawyer here in Dallas at Oryx USA Corporation. So I was in their mergers and acquisitions group, moving hundreds of millions of dollars of deals by day and working pro bono by night. And it got to a place where I really wanted to devote myself full time to helping transform unjust systems. Until in May of 2016, I resigned from corporate law, and President Obama had just a few months left before he was leaving office, and hit the ground running. Did a lot of work during those times, and then we hit January 2017, and I found myself on my couch in sweats, I think the same sweats for 2 days in a row, because I was just like, what did I do? I left my job, for this, and what is next? And, it was a lot of back and forth, but I had represented many incredible people during the Obama administration who had received mercy through clemency. And so I linked arms with two of my former clients who had life sentences, Sharonda Jones and Corey Jacobs, and we co-founded the Buried Alive Project together. I knew that I wanted to continue doing the work of freeing people, and they felt a survivor's remorse, if you will, because they were free, but they had left behind people who they had served 15, 20 years with, who they knew should have a second chance just as they did. And so we linked arms to form the Buried Alive Project and really tackle the work through litigation, legislation, and most importantly, humanization.
And so when it comes to the litigation work that you're doing at the Buried Alive Project, what does that look like? Give me the kind of nuts and bolts of the cases you're taking on, how you're going about doing this work.
Yeah, it is scratching concrete. It is picking locks to human cages. It is a liberation heist. And it is my life's work, has been my life's work so far. And so the cases that we take on through the Buried Alive Project, we are in the post-conviction phase. And so we have a niche of people we serve who are serving life sentences in federal prison. And there's no parole in federal prison. And so people are serving fundamental death sentences for drug offenses. And so through that work, through the post-conviction work, we have to rely on policy and changes in the law, to be able to go back and free people. And so it is monotonous at times, but it is really using the law and the power of words to change hearts and minds.
Let's take a big step back and talk about the war on drugs. This is an approach to issues related to drugs, drug use, drug abuse, drug addiction, that people say kind of dates back to 1971. You can put the dates differently, ramped up in the 90s. But just kind of walk through how that sort of legal framework works and how it still plays out today, how you see it, playing out today.
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. The war on drugs, I am of the camp that it did start in the 70s and really ramped up in the late 80s. And the legal framework in which we find ourselves because of the war on drugs is really surrounded by these harsh penalties, imprisonment for drug crimes. And this was foreign territory for me. I was a law student at SMU and my eyes were really open to how these laws work. And in law school, I was writing a research paper about the disparity in sentencing between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And so what I learned is the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act was one of the laws that really, really fueled the war on drugs. And in the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, it is where we saw this ushering in of mandatory minimums, which was stripping judges of imposing individualized sentences. We saw this ushering in of this egregious 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And what I learned as I was researching this law in law school was that you could have 500 grams of powder cocaine. I could have only 5 grams of crack, and we would receive the same sentence in prison. And it wasn't lost on me, even as a law student, but I don't think it's lost on many of us that in the late 80s, more affluent white people were using powder cocaine, and crack cocaine was running rampant through communities of color. And what this disproportionate ratio did was it locked up a lot of black and brown people. And as I was writing this paper in law school, and I'm like uncovering all of these things, you know, and I know it a little, but to really read it and to read the Sentencing Commission's papers on it, powder, crack, they're two forms of the same drug. And so what has happened and what I've seen in my work is that the prison population skyrocketed during the war on drugs. In the federal system where my work is centered, even today, over 80% of people in federal prison for drugs are people of color. And I think there is a crying need here, and I think we cannot stop short of acknowledging the magnitude of those numbers and what it means.
And I think one thing just to pull out, you know, you talked about the life sentence that people get, right? This, you know, that comes with no opportunity of parole. And that is often for nonviolent drug crimes. And I think a lot of people, you know, you're deep in this work, but I think for many people who are unfamiliar with the system, that comes as a surprise that you can get a life sentence for drug crimes that are not violent, you know, and you're in jail forever, basically.
You're in jail forever. And
or I should say prison forever.
Prison.
To be
True.
technical.
That's what was very perplexing for me. My mother was incarcerated. And for many years, my mother suffered from a drug addiction that unfortunately became much stronger than she was. And that drug addiction and her weakness through the drug addiction led to her incarceration. And so I was, as a young adult, brought face to face, very proximate to this issue of mass incarceration and the devastation that it causes. And my mother had a drug addiction, but she was sentenced to prison. And she served 2.5 years, and it felt like forever. So I can't imagine life without parole. And I think part of what I was feeling and seeing when I would talk to people about this issue is that we've become so desensitized to numbers, and we throw around 15-year and 20-year sentences and as if we're talking about $15 or $20. And 15 years in prison is a very, very long time. And to compare that to life without parole, the clients that I have that are free now, the clients that we still serve, they're serving the same amount of time in prison as the Unabomber was. And I really wanted through our work for people to feel that. With every fiber in their being, I want them to feel it.
I want to get into some of the mechanics of some of these drug laws and how they work and how people get imprisoned for so long behind them. You know, one of the things that I think, you know, felt like news to me was the way that conspiracy charges work. And this is a tool used by law enforcement in convicting individuals of drug offenses. So, like, walk us through the elements of drug conspiracy charges and how these elements tend to, you know, most often impact, you know, lower level offenders.
Yeah, I remember being in law school at SMU, and I knew I was going to practice corporate law. And so I was taking any criminal law course that I could. I was so interested in it. But we had federal prosecutors came to one of our classes. I think it was federal criminal procedure that I was taking. And I remember one of the prosecutors telling us about conspiracy. And I remember her saying it's their greatest tool. And when I got into this work, I was in law school, and one of my professors, Professor Robert Udishin, was an adjunct professor, but he's also was one of the best criminal lawyers in the state. And I would ask him questions about it, and so I'm trying to really understand this conspiracy law. And what I learned is it's essentially three simple elements. It's an agreement to traffic drugs in any amount between two or more people who voluntarily enter the agreement.
So it's like, come over to my house and bring some drugs with you?
Yeah.
Is that enough?
That's enough. That's enough. And so what I was comparing it to was state law. And there's this, usually in state law, the same elements are there, but there's a crucial element of this overt act. And there's an overt act element on the federal level too, but that overt act could simply be the discussion of it, of the type of drug, the quantity, and how the price. That's an overt act. And so what I like to do is I really like to always tie this to the human element. And so as a law student, as I'm writing this paper in law school, and really trying to teach my classmates what I'm learning about the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, I think because my mother was incarcerated, I really understood how important it is to center the person. And I wanted to find real people that these laws had impacted to be able to share these stories with my class. And so I was in the Underwood Law Library at SMU one night, and I'm researching for the paper, and I wanted to come up with cases. And I did a Google search of like woman federal prison, and a YouTube video of a woman named Sharonda Jones pops up. And Sharonda was serving a life sentence for drugs in federal prison. She was in her 10th year. She had never been arrested ever before for a traffic ticket or otherwise. So it was her first felony conviction, no misdemeanor convictions. And I just remember, as I'm working on the paper, I remember thinking, there has to be something more to this story. Is she a member of an international drug cartel? Are there bodies involved? But the more I researched, I found that there wasn't, that Sharonda had been convicted of one single count of federal drug conspiracy. She had actually been charged with 7 different crimes, 1 conspiracy, and like 6 more substantive aiding and abetting charges. And she was acquitted of 6 charges and found guilty of this federal drug conspiracy. And so I'm thinking back to the prosecutor. This is our greatest tool. And I'm thinking about the elements of it. And it was just mind-blowing to me how this all came crashing down. Sharonda Jones, I saw so much of myself in her. She's a Black daughter of the rural South like me. And I was a 2L, at this incredible law school, and she was in her 10th year of a life without parole sentence. And there was just something about her case that tugged at my soul. And I sent her a card. I told her I was a law student, that I knew next to nothing about criminal law, but that I wanted to help her get out of prison. And she wrote me back. This was in 2009, 15 years ago, and I still have the letter. And she was very gracious, she thanked me for reaching out, but it was very nonchalant, like, yeah, right. How are you going to get me out of prison?
Nice of you to
she
think
wished
of
me
me
well in my studies, and I kept writing her, and I ultimately go to visit her and start to learn more really about this conspiracy. And what I learned was that Sharonda Jones, on a handful of occasions, had trafficked powder cocaine between Dallas and Houston, connecting 2 friends who were drug suppliers. And the drug supplier in the case had testified against Sharonda Jones in exchange for a lesser sentence, and he was already free by the time I took the case. And he had admitted to trafficking in hundreds of kilograms of powder cocaine. And the drug suppliers in Dallas had also testified against Sharonda. And so Sharonda, who was, really a middle person and would make $1,000 or so on 4 or 5 occasions, and she was in the middle of this because of conspiracy, because we have the 2 or more people, the agreement to traffic drugs, and who voluntarily entered the conspiracy. And the interesting part about drug conspiracy laws is Sharonda Jones's case and many others, she was never caught with any drugs, never in possession of large amounts of money, never on any drug surveillance, no controlled buys. She was convicted solely based on the testimony of her co-conspirators, who received lesser sentences in exchange for their testimony. And how conspiracy works is everyone in the conspiracy is responsible for the whole. And so the drug supplier in Houston said, well, she purchased, 30 kilograms of powder cocaine for me. So the courts, through the way conspiracy works and sentencing works, they said, okay, we got 30 kilos of powder. The people in Dallas said, well, when I got the powder, I would convert it and cook it into crack. And so the way conspiracy works and the federal sentencing laws is the judge is saying, okay, well, then it was reasonably foreseeable to Sharonda that there was going to be crack cocaine. And so,
which means that it's sentenced at 100 times
exactly
the number of years.
Exactly. So
as
there
it
was
would be for powder.
Exactly. So there is a mathematical calculation. There was a DEA ratio, and it says it's the way you convert powder to crack is you multiply it by 0.85. And so Sharonda, instead of 30 kilograms of powder cocaine that she never had, that people are just testifying she has, instead of that, she was sentenced under the harsher crack laws for roughly 23 kilograms of crack. That led to a mandatory life sentence.
And the guy in Houston, the guy in Dallas, I mean, they were incentivized, right? This was part of a deal that they would testify and they would get lighter sentences?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is, I think we should say, not uncommon, correct?
Not uncommon at all.
I'm not a lawyer, so I will ask a lawyer. How is that conspiracy not, like, hearsay? If I say somebody did something, that usually doesn't just hold up in court in general on its own. Am I wrong here? I know I have a room full of lawyers, so I apologize to everybody in the legal profession for my ignorance.
No, in general, and that's what I thought too, but the federal level is totally different. And we, so far with the Buried Alive Project over the last few years, we've helped free over 60 men and women who were sentenced to life in prison. And thank you. And over 80% of them, it was solely based on testimony of other people. No drugs, no large sums of money, like no substantive evidence. It was all based on the testimony of others. And it was just, I don't know, it still blows my mind to talk about how the drug supplier was already free when Sharonda was serving life without parole.
So I also just want to kind of go back to, you're a law student taking this on, feeling this connection. I mean, what, I guess, sort of gave you the hope that you'd be able to really kind of do something with it? I mean, I just think that so many, for so many law students, just getting through the classwork, getting through the reading, doing all the outlining that you need to do is all consuming. And you're taking on something, as potentially momentous as trying to get somebody freed from prison. Where did you find that, I guess, sense that you would actually be able to do something to make a difference here?
Yeah, delusion. I grew up in rural East Texas with a very strong faith. And I just believed, I think that knowing that I was a law student and learning these skills and having this great privilege, to be in a position to help someone, it was there. It really tugged at my soul. I don't know that I could have known about Sharonda and not have done anything. And so we went on this journey of literally not knowing how, but really believing that she would be free. And I think that is important in any work that we do, and especially when we're dealing with freedom in people's lives. I believe Sharonda Jones would be free, and I believed it with conviction in my heart. And even as a law student, would draft these motions, and I was not licensed, and I was like Googling again lawyers, criminal defense lawyers, and I get them. They would always hate the meeting, and I'm like, I have this motion drafted, but I'm not admitted, not licensed. And they were so gracious, and people would, talk a good talk, but never really help. And I remember telling Sharonda, I'm going to pass the bar soon, and I will never have to ask another lawyer to help file the case. And that's what happened. Yeah.
That's incredible. You talked about former President Obama's clemency initiative and work you did around that. That was all about addressing the fallout from this disparity between crack and powder cocaine, right? And I think for a lot of people, you probably get this a lot. It's like, oh, they fixed or reduced that disparity, so therefore the people who are, living with those sentences are going to get out now. But that's not actually how it worked. So just talk me through kind of how that sort of, how many years were you sort of working on those cases? What did that work look like?
Yeah, that what you mentioned is probably what I struggle the most with still, but I definitely did as a law student. So we're from 1986. I'm in law school. I came across Sharonda's case in 2009. I'm really getting into it in 2010. And there had been a huge shift in the federal sentencing landscape. There was a change in attitudes. People were seeing that these mandatory minimums and these drug laws were having this disproportionate impact. I mean, the numbers don't lie. And the Sentencing Commission was issuing reports basically saying, hey, we got it wrong. These are two forms of the same drug. It should be a 1-to-1 ratio. And then you had judges on the federal bench who's saying, this is not right. We were blinded by this. It's time to right these wrongs. And so in 2010, again, under President Obama, the Fair Sentencing Act was passed. And through this act, it reduced that ratio from 100-to-1 to 18-to-1. And we had the Sentencing Commission amending the guidelines in a way that was reducing sentencing guidelines for crack cases. And I was so excited about it. So I would go to Sharonda. Sharonda's learning of things while she's in prison. And we're looking into these laws, and we would just get this sinking feeling in the pit of our stomachs to find out these laws were not retroactive. And so I go back to Professor.
It's just applied to people who are sentenced after that law is signed into effect.
Yes. And so it was just mind-boggling to me, that because to me, logically, if the law is wrong today, it was wrong yesterday. And we have people serving life sentences today under yesterday's drug laws. And I remember Professor Udishin telling me when I went to his office all confused as a law student, and he said, a lot of times, these laws are passed, there's compromise between the two political parties, and there's the convenience of the courts, not wanting to overburden courts. And it was hard for me to swallow, because to me, freedom should not be a matter of convenience or compromise. And that is what we ran into over and over again. So lots of laws were changing. There were reforms being made. And, very, very sadly, Sharonda Jones was still facing life without parole.
Did the law ever change to make that retroactive, or is it still not?
Yes. So in 2018, President Trump signed the First Step Act into law. And the First Step Act, so we're in 2018, that was 2010. You know, we're 8 years later. The First Step Act brought retroactivity to the 18-to-1 ratio. The First Step Act also ushered in 3 other sentencing reforms that were not retroactive. And so, you know, we still take a step forward to take 3 back.
You talked earlier about, you know, just the impact of having a parent who's incarcerated, having a mom who's incarcerated. And I actually first met you when I was doing some reporting on women who've been incarcerated. The incarceration rate for women in this country and in the state really went up dramatically. And a lot of research came out saying a lot of these women are moms. A lot of them are charged with nonviolent crimes, crimes related to poverty, crimes related to addiction. And so I connected with you for a story to connect with one of the people who's involved in the program that you launched, another program that you launched called Girls Embracing Mothers. So tell us about that program. What does it do? What's the goal? How does it work?
Yeah, so Girls Embracing Mothers, we go by GEM. It is a nonprofit organization to empower young girls whose mothers are incarcerated and their mothers, you know, empower them to break the cycle of incarceration and dream their biggest dreams and step into their fullest potential. And we celebrated 10 years of Girls Embracing Mothers in October of 2023. And we partner with Texas Women's Prisons. So for the past 10 years, we've partnered with Texas Women's Prisons in Gatesville, Texas. And once a month, we make the 4.5-hour round trip, taking girls to visit their mothers in prison. And through our partnership, we have enhanced prison visits. And so we're not in the general population visitation. We're in an education building to ourselves. The prison gives us 4 hours instead of 2 hours to meet. They allow us to bring in food, to eat lunch with the moms. We do art therapy, and we always cover curriculum that revolves around healing justice. And through that, you know, it's just so near and dear to my heart because my mother was incarcerated. And it's devastating to have any loved one in prison. But I can tell you from firsthand experience that when it's your mama, it is a primal wound. And I think that is what drew me so much to Sharonda's case as well, because she had a daughter. And her daughter was 8 years old when Sharonda went away, and 18 when I met them. And so there is something so special with Jim. We really work to break the cycle and build a bond.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that, you know, really hits home is just that reality that, you know, it's birthdays, it's the sort of, you know, daily advice, the, you know, acne, all of those things that are the milestones of normal sort of growing up, right? That you look to your parent to get. What have you learned through Jim? You've had 10 years of this, you know, working with you know, girls of all ages, working with moms. I mean, what are the kind of takeaway lessons, I think, that you've really come away with from this work?
I've learned that people who have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system have this untapped potential and ingenuity that America needs to thrive. And we are talking about a group of people who were often taught to stereotype and ignore. But now this group of people included my mama. And it opened my eyes in a way that was so necessary. And I think I just get so excited because I know our girls, I know their moms, I know my mom, you know, who's been home for 16 years now almost. She's sober. She works as a nurse up the street at Homeward Bound. at a drug recovery center, and so I've seen it firsthand, when people have a chance at redemption. And so I've just learned through Jim that it is my job to amplify their voices, to show the world, their potential and the great things that they do. And just there is just an inherent dignity and worth in all of us. We don't earn it. It's a birthright.
Whether there are a lot of folks, I want to talk about coming home after incarceration, because, whether it's because you were sort of freed from a sentence that you never thought would let you out, or just because your sentence is ending. Lots and lots and lots of people are coming out of prisons, coming homes, coming back to the community, and often facing immense challenges. I know your mom had to fight to get her license back. Talk to me about sort of what the challenges are, what happens to people after they leave prison.
Yeah, there's lots of challenges, and I've been able to see it up close and personal through Girls Embracing Mothers, through the people that I've helped free with the Buried Alive Project, and I've just witnessed how we free people from prison in this country and restore them to poverty. And on top of that, it's exacerbated by challenges to housing and employment. My mom's apartment was in my name for years, probably until 5 years ago, because she just couldn't get an apartment in her name.
Because landlords would do a background check, see the criminal records, and say no.
And say no. Or they would say yes, in a neighborhood that wasn't very safe for a single woman. And not only would they say yes in those neighborhoods, but the deposit was sometimes triple. And the employment barriers are just crucial. Part of, even when you and I connected before, what we were doing is I'm realizing that your freedom journey doesn't end when you step out of prison gates. In so many ways, it just begins. And so I've been working to see how we can help create what I call sustainable liberation for people. And that must include equity. It must include a seat at the table for people who've been impacted by the criminal legal system, and it must include access to resources. I think what I see a lot of is that it's so hard for us in America to even believe that people like Sharonda Jones and others have the capacity to bring great things to the world. And I can sit here and tell you some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life have been my clients and formerly incarcerated people. And I know that this country is missing out on a lot of ingenuity and really in a way that should not be looked upon as charity. It's an investment, and it's an investment and that has a ripple effect for all of us.
Right. How do you tap the brilliant ideas that people have so that they can actually execute them?
Yeah.
I mean, tease out a little bit more of this idea of sustainable liberation. I mean, in a nuts and bolts way, what does getting towards that look like?
There's not many nuts and bolts to it. It's very simple. To me, economic freedom is key. And when you think about it, people with money aren't stealing diapers out of Walmart. People with money aren't selling $10 rocks on the corner. And I think there's this underlying issue of poverty, and that mass incarceration just exacerbates, because you already have these underlying socioeconomic issues, and then you get out and you can't get a job, you can't find a place to live, and it just starts this vicious cycle back through the system. And so what I did was I launched yet another initiative. I'm very excited about this one. I launched the Manifest Freedom Fund. And through the Manifest Freedom Fund, to date, we have granted roughly $560,000 in grants to formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs. And our very first fellow was Sharonda Jones, because she is free. And Sharonda lives in Dallas. She's here with us tonight. And it is, I really want us to take a moment, because it is nothing short of a miracle that she's here. And yeah, Sharonda, thank you for trusting me with your life and your vision. And so Sharonda Jones was our very first Manifest Freedom Fellow, so we were able to give her a grant, a meaningful grant, and she has a food truck. It's called Fed Up. And she's open on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Sundays, and she's available to cater.
What kind of food?
She has the best egg rolls.
Right.
Burgers, turkey burgers. I mean, she plays with all types of things, and she's just an amazing cook. Sharonda had a restaurant before prison called Cooking on Lamar. It's right down the street on Lamar Street. And she's just always had this love for cooking. And even in prison, she became known for her culinary creations, because it takes a lot of improvisation to make anything a delicacy in prison. And she would make icing using the inside of Oreo cookies. She'd make, chicken balls with canned chicken and Doritos. She'd whip up a cranberry sauce with assorted jelly packets, and she just became known for tamales. And she always had a dream for having a food truck. And that's what was so special about her. And many of the clients that I have, even though they're facing this reality that would be unbearable for many people, she always talked about when she would be free. She always believed it, and she wanted this food truck not just to serve great food, but also to provide employment opportunities for people coming out of the system. And that's what I think is so important about the work that we do at Manifest Freedom and investing in entrepreneurs like Sharonda, because of the ripple effect. They're going to be the ones that hire formerly incarcerated people, because they know of their potential. And so economic freedom is definitely the way to create sustainable liberation.
Say the name of the food truck one more time.
Fed Up.
Y'all hear that?
And it is a double entendre of being fed up with the system, and your bellies will definitely be fed with some great food.
I want to also to sort of pivot a bit and talk about the way that your work revolves around drug laws and the way that we treat addiction with law enforcement primarily, right? That's our sort of largest response. That's the best funded response that we have to issues related to addiction and stemming from it, and less of a public health approach. Let me ask you a twofold question. One is, do you see that shifting, that sort of paradigm? Do you really feel like that is fundamentally shifting? And just sort of, we've talked some, but, just what does it mean for folks who are navigating challenges related to substance abuse disorders while also navigating the legal system, incarceration?
Yeah, I feel that as America punishes addiction, the irony of that to me is that America has an addiction to mass incarceration. And I think that that's an issue, an addiction that needs to be addressed too. And even seeing it with my own mom, I can only speak from my experience, and my mother had suffered from a pretty severe drug addiction for several years. that led to her getting this criminal conviction, and she was placed on probation. And because she had a drug addiction, she was not in compliance with probation, not because she committed any new crimes, but because she wasn't passing her drug test. And so her probation was revoked, and she got more probation. And then it was revoked again, and she got more probation. And then the third time it was revoked, she got sentenced to prison. And in none of that was there any opportunity for rehabilitation or drug course or any that wasn't an option. And so I do see that tide shifting. We are from rural East Texas. My mom's case was in good old Red River County, and there was just no such thing. Dallas County, they definitely have lots of alternative courts, and I did see a really big shift in that, but very, very sadly, I was just in Baton Rouge, Louisiana last week at Southern University Law Center, and very sadly, those great strides are changing, and they're being rolled back at a pace that will give you whiplash. And it's scary to make such progress, to get to a point in this country where we understand the power of redemption and how with just a signature of a governor or a president, those reforms can be just ripped away. And so I'm always hopeful. I think that hope is an act of resistance at times, that can be very helpful. But there is a reality, and there's a reality that there is a very expeditious shift backwards. And it's really disheartening to see.
That retrenchment you're describing, I mean, I'm gonna ask you to play anthropologist or sociologist or political scientist, maybe. I mean, what is driving that? It's
been driven, from what I see and having studied these laws from the 70s, the 80s, as I mentioned, I'm seeing a lot of the same tough on crime rhetoric that was happening in the late 80s. And there's a play, and the play, sadly, in those spaces where tough on crime is being pushed, the people play on fear of other people, of our American citizens. And when we have, propaganda that really strokes that fear, that's how we end up back in times, that feel like the 80s as it relates to laws.
So we have an election this year, folks may have heard. And I say that, but I also, I wonder how you kind of view electoral politics as part of this solution. But then I also want to ask you to just sort of say, I want to get to some questions from the audience, but well, let's first talk about elections, and then I want to ask you after that what people here can do if they say, I want to do something. Where do I, put my shoulder to kind of wedge against some of this? But talk me through how you view electoral politics as one of the solutions to some of this.
Yeah, it's a critical solution, and I think it's important, as it relates to criminal justice reform, that we really understand the platforms of the people that we vote for. One of the great things about criminal justice reform is that it is becoming increasingly more of a bipartisan issue. And for me, in the work that I do, and for the incredible people that I represent who are still in the belly of the beast, we don't have the privilege to be partisan. And my clients, whoever is in office, that has their best interests at heart, I think is always a plus. And I think with that being said, the best interest is important. And so just knowing the platforms of the people that are running, whether it's local, state, federal. But not even just that, it's also holding them accountable once they're elected, to uphold those promises. That's very, very important too.
And so for folks in the audience, other than being an informed voter and talking to their friends about things like this, like what can regular people do to try, to say, if I wanted to move the needle, if I wanted to push towards sustainable liberation?
There's so many things, there's not, it wasn't just one thing that got us here, and so it'll be various things that get us out of this. But I think some of those things, the number one, other than voting, as you mentioned, because that's incredibly important, is to educate ourselves about these issues and how these laws work. As I mentioned, I had no idea about federal conspiracy. I didn't really know it was a thing that people got life sentences, other than a childhood friend of mine, and I just, chunked that up to being rural East Texas justice, until I found out his case wasn't an anomaly. And so educating ourselves, whether it's through books, my book, of course, watching documentaries. Ava DuVernay has a very powerful documentary called 13th. It is great. Definitely watching that. She has another powerful limited series called When They See Us. Books like Just Mercy by my hero, Brian Stevenson. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. I mean, really educating ourselves about these issues and opening our eyes to it, and then sharing that with those around us. And I think really being honest with ourselves about the underlying current through this. We have to acknowledge this and really look at it for what it is. And to me, it is beyond legitimate debate that racism runs rampant through America's criminal legal system. And we have to really confront that and what that means. There's not any arguing that could be done with that. The numbers don't lie, and they're screaming at us to pay attention. And so through educating ourselves, we can learn these things and share with other people. And I think being honest with ourselves too, there was a research that came out a couple of years ago that literally someone on the opposite side of you has known or has a loved one who's been incarcerated. And so getting over that this issue impacts every single person in this room, every one of us. And so getting over the stigma, helping to shift the paradigm and change the narrative through narrative change work is very important to help ease that fear. Reaching out to local criminal justice reform organizations to see how you can roll up your sleeves to help and volunteer. Donate financially. Organizations are struggling as well because that whiplash in the laws isn't just happening there. It's happening in racial justice oriented organizations. We're seeing funding being stripped, and we can't, volunteers are always great too, but we can't, overlook that funding is needed at all. And I think really, really believing that we are in a country, we're supposed to be in a country of second chances. And for many people, many of the clients that I've represented haven't even had a first chance. And so understanding the importance of building empathy for other people. So voting, of course, educating ourselves, volunteering with local criminal justice reform organizations, and then sharing that we've learned and know with our networks.
Okay. Let's ask some questions. Here's an easier one. Where could we find the Fed Up food truck?
That's a great one. Her website is fedupfoodtrucks.com, and it is at 4211 Great Trinity Forest Way, Dallas, Texas. So it's right off 45, not even 7 minutes from here.
All right. Question about the clemency initiative work that you did. I mean, talk through kind of some of the the battles that you faced along the way, the, kind of red tape, the, navigating, these are complex bureaucracies and systems. The question says, especially with Sharonda, but, what are some of the sort of, I guess, kind of challenges that you faced through that work or through the work you're doing now?
Yeah, with clemency, I like to say Sharonda and I, because we worked together, we were doing clemency before clemency was cool. And so there's no blueprint. Clemency, for people who may not know, to me, it's where justice meets mercy. And it's an exclusive power granted to the president through the United States Constitution and governors through state constitutions. And with the federal level, it goes to the United States Pardon Attorney. If she recommends it to the Department of Justice. And what we learned is once it's at the Department of Justice, it's going through 6 or 7 additional levels of review. If it makes it out of there, then it goes to White House counsel, who then will recommend it to the president for signature.
And just to clarify, I mean, this is when you have a president who has come out and said, we're going to do this. We're going to grant clemency. If people meet, people's cases meet these conditions. I'm willing and interested, and I have my pen ready. And it still takes, I think you just listed like 8 or 9.
It still takes
10
that.
different people
and
in multiple offices.
The wild part about it is it's going through the Department of Justice, which is the same department that convicted people to start with. And it's something that I have to suck up every day, that I'm having to make this plea to show a human being shouldn't die in prison, and I'm having to plead this to the very institutions that sentenced them there to start with. And that is a part of the clemency process that really needs change because of those onerous levels of review without transparency. And so if a person, you never know what level of review it's in. If a person's denied clemency, you never know why. You just get a standard letter of the denial. There's no time frame of when the decisions are made. With Sharonda's case, after all these non-retroactive laws, I realized clemency was the only way that she would ever be free. And her petition was pending for 2 years. Yeah.
Is that a typical time period? Do you have a sense of how that sort of compares?
There's no such thing as typical. There's no average or no such thing as typical when it comes to that. I've had other clients, I had 4 clients who received clemency under the Trump administration, and the process was totally different. There was no clemency applications. It was just totally different, which was definitely in his right to do. One of those clients I had life sentence as well, was sentenced at 22 years old, and even the federal judge resigned from the bench. Federal judges have lifetime appointments. Yes. And this judge resigned from the bench in protest of having to give Chris Young a life sentence and worked with me to help free him. And Chris Young is here tonight as well. And so, I've seen the clemency process through 2 administrations now. The third one, we're under now, and that the length of time just varies.
Under the Biden administration, are we seeing? Is it easier to move people through the clemency process than it was under Trump? How does it compare to under Biden?
Yeah, I wish I could say that. It's been very underwhelming. And so the hope is, that we can encourage President Biden. Sharonda, Chris, and I will all be in D.C. on Friday at the Department of Justice at an event that the Pardon Attorney is holding to ideally encourage President Biden to grant more. So he has done some for sure, and we're hoping to see a lot more soon.
Not to make it overly political, but I guess I wonder, if you see a new Trump administration, do you anticipate that changing? Is there any indication that you've gotten that he would act differently when it comes to clemency than he did when he was in office prior?
Yeah, the indication comes from him directly because he's calling for death penalty for people with drug offenses now, which is in direct contrast to what was happening before. And so, yeah, we'll just have to see.
Tell us about some more of the clients that you've gotten out of prison.
So one is Alice Marie Johnson, who also received clemency from President Trump. What a lot of people don't know is that I had known Alice since I was a law student as well, because she was incarcerated at Carswell with Sharonda, and her and Sharonda were best friends in prison. They're still great friends now, and Alice used to put on just some truly remarkable plays within the prison where even people from the outside would come in to watch her plays.
Oh, wow.
And there was once I went to the prison. I did not even tell Sharonda I was coming to the prison, but I went to the prison for gym. I was trying to get the gym program in the prison, and meeting with the chaplain, and all of a sudden when the chaplain's walking me out of the prison, he's like, "Oh, do you want to go into the gym? We have some remarkable women there working on a play." And that's when I met Alice. And it was so many women in the gym, you know, you wouldn't even know they were in prison. You would have thought it wasn't, you wouldn't have thought it was a production, you know, and the women were producers and directors and costume designers. And I met Alice there and saw her great work, and Sharonda was also in there. And I had not told her I was coming, and I had no idea I was going to make this detour and see her. And I just remember standing behind the chaplain, and I just put my finger up to my mouth, because I had not told them that I represented someone there. And he was like, "I want you to meet Alice Johnson and Sharonda Jones." And so we shook hands like we never met a day in our lives. And later we laughed. She said, "I thought you were coming to get me." I wish I will be there soon. You know, so yeah, remarkable people who are doing remarkable things. Corey Jacobs is a co-founder of Buried Alive. He's doing great work with the lifestyle Winergy brand, that he's just motivating and empowering people. Chris Young is working on his memoir and in college right now, you know. And so it's just great to see what everyone's doing through our work with Manifest Freedom. You know, I've been doing this work 15 years now, and I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And I just want to do things different. I'll be forever committed to freedom. And through Manifest Freedom, we're doing a lot of grants as well in arts and humanities, and really excited to see how that comes about. You know, my dream is to have an art exhibition, you know, where I can showcase art from formerly incarcerated people. So we're looking to do really light things and to bring that great energy to people so people can see what I see.
Yeah. I know you just said you're tired. Are you writing another book? Somebody asks.
I am writing another book, and I am tired, but I'm coming out of a severe burnout and exhaustion period, and I feel great now, you know. And so my next book, through that reflection, because part of the lessons that I've learned through this, when you're asking me the lessons, keeping up the work at the pace I had been is just not sustainable for my body, my mind, you know. And so in taking this time, the next book that I'm working on now is called And Then She Freed Herself. Yeah.
That's great. If you could snap your fingers and eliminate or implement 3 laws or policies, what would they be?
Ooh, that's hard. I'll keep it. I'll be able to answer it because I can keep it to like Buried Alive.
Okay.
So I would definitely eliminate an option of life sentences. I would probably eliminate an option of any sentence over 10 years, honestly. I would eliminate mandatory minimums. So eliminate life without parole, eliminate mandatory minimums. And did you say just on the law side?
Laws or policies.
I would eliminate policies that discriminate against formerly incarcerated people through employment.
Working with young girls with incarcerated mothers, what kinds of things do you do to help their self-confidence and encourage them despite their circumstances?
Oh, I think the most important thing that we do that I've witnessed that helps with their confidence is having them around other girls who are going through similar situations. We've watched them build bonds that our curriculum could never foster, you know? And so that's been incredible. But we have curriculum that revolves around healing justice. We have annual summer camps. We do empowerment workshops through our Amplify Her series, and really helping them to break that cycle. We recently were participants in a program called Unlock Potential, where several of our girls, 16 to 24, they went through like a 6 to 8 week interpersonal skills training and mock interviews. And through a partnership with Sam's Club, several of them are working while they're in high school at Sam's Club, making $17 an hour with an opportunity for tuition reimbursement. And so all of that is giving them that confidence to know that they can break the cycle of incarceration and to really see through other people, you know, that it's possible.
Yeah. Are there any of the girls from the early years that you've kept in touch with who are now perhaps adult women?
Yes, many of them. You know, I think what's so special about Jim is we're small but mighty. And over 10 years, you know, as you can imagine, it started with my mom and I in a van, taking like 6 girls to the prison. And we've grown. I mean, we've served thousands of women and girls in different states over the past 10 years. And being able to witness their growth is just incredible. So many of them came to our 10-year anniversary brunch. Some of them are mothers themselves now, you know, and to see them there and to still see the bonds exist, I think it really speaks to the way that Jim chose to operate. And I think it could get really compelling, and there's can be pressure from funders to grow far and wide. And we really stood our ground that we wanted to go slow and deep. And that made a tremendous difference.
Mm-hmm. A comment? You're a rock star. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
I guess, you know, there's a question about how you get funding for the nonprofits, you know, how you go about, you know, how so the question is, how did your nonprofits come about and gain funding? How did you get these initiatives off the ground? And so I think there's kind of 2 pieces in this that I think you have just, you know, real expertise on. One is sort of how do you actually build something, you know, from idea to reality. And then once it's kind of moving forward, how do you keep it funded, keep it going?
Yeah, that's something that I've had lots of lessons in. And the delusional part of my brain with Jim and Buried Alive, I just got started without any funding. With Girls Embracing Mothers, my mom and I were just funding it as we could initially. Buried Alive project, when I left my corporate job, I was not delusional with that because I waited until I got my year-end bonus. And so I was able to self-fund Buried Alive for a while, and then we started applying for larger grants. But it has been challenging. Like, it's taken Jim 10 years, you know, to get to a sustainable place. Thankful very much so to the Walmart Foundation, who gave us a very substantial grant, and really understanding the power of multi-year grants, really understanding the power of trust-based philanthropy. And through the Buried Alive project, it's been tough. I can't sugarcoat that at all. It is very tough fundraising for direct services for people. So much so that, you know, we still work on a very, very lean budget at the Buried Alive project.
Can I ask you just real quick, is the challenge on that there the work is somehow like not in the funding categories that foundations fund? Is it that people aren't swayed to support this work in particular? Is it that just sort of donations from the general public, it doesn't kind of make it through? I mean, what's the challenge?
All of the above.
Okay.
I think part of the big challenge is people don't care. And I think that we fund things that we care about.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, what I've learned too, aside from the lack of empathy for individual people, is a lot of foundations, they're really big, rightfully so, on policy work. They want to change the laws and have a widespread impact. And, as a corporate lawyer, it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around this ROI business model in nonprofit. And it is something that, even with that, even, for example, with the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010 to the First Step Act, it took 8 years for that law to change. And it's really just trying to show that people need to be getting free in the meantime. And I think also there's this misconceived notion that policy work and systemic change can only come from Capitol Hill or state legislators. And I'm here to tell you that systemic change can also come from the individuals that we help free, like Sharonda Jones, and the ripple effect that they'll have on other people, that they positively impact in the future. And so those are the challenges that I've seen. And so I really had to shift the model with Buried Alive and say, hey, we have to do what we can with what we have. People still need to be free. And so I started partnering with law firms. And, they've come through, I partnered with several international, big law firms that, many of you know of, I'm sure. And I've trained through that probably over 150 lawyers who take cases with us pro bono.
Wow.
Yeah.
If lawyers in the audience want to get involved, do they reach out to you?
Yes.
How do they get involved?
Yes, they can reach out to me.
Or law students. I think we have some law students here as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I'm so glad law students are here. Yeah.
Okay. So tonight's speaking series examines, this is my final question. Tonight's speaking series examines the relationships between the rule of law and human rights. What changes do you hope to see in the criminal justice system regarding individual humanity, or I guess to put humanity into the system?
I think it's definitely a critical intersection between the rule of law and human rights. And I would like to see an elimination of mass incarceration. Just having a truly meaningful reduced carceral imprint and just a reallocation of those resources. This country spends $80 billion a year on incarceration. $80 billion. And to just think of the reallocation of those resources to education, to employment, to healthcare, to helping alleviate poverty, to entrepreneurs, and so I really like to see the reallocation of resources through that, and just a shift in hearts and minds. I think that is just crucial. This narrative change aspect is really key, and a lot of the work that we do is around changing the narrative, and really having people become more informed about the criminal legal system and ways that we can advance justice, because I still believe in that we can advance justice in this country in a very meaningful way.
Thank you, Brittany. That was excellent.
Brittany and Chris, thank you so much for this enlightening and inspiring conversation. Brittany, you're amazing. Thank you so much for your work. Brittany will be signing books in the lobby. If you're interested, we'll be selling some in the museum store if you didn't bring one. So please purchase a book and get in line. And if you are here tonight and would like CLE credit, there's stop by the table near the exit to get your CLE credit. Thank you for being with us. It's wonderful having you. Thank you too so much.